Hello, everyone. I'm Jack Fisher, and welcome to my world. And after over a year of pandemics, lockdowns, delays, and cancellations, it finally feels like the world is healing. And a major part of that healing is the return of big summer blockbusters, as well as the return of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because as great as WandaVision, Loki, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier have been, there's just no substitute for going to a movie theater and enjoying a big MCU style spectacle. And that's what many have been waiting for, myself included. And the release of Black Widow marks the overdue but bittersweet return of the cinematic experience that we've all come to know and love. Just being able to see this movie in a theater, one operating at full capacity, complete with overpriced popcorn and sticky floors, it was refreshing to say the least. For many, Black Widow will be the first time they've gone to a movie theater all year. And many saw it as a milestone of sorts, a signal that the lockdowns and delays were over. The summer movie season was back and it was okay to go out and enjoy it. But as exhilarating as it was to enjoy that cinematic experience again, there's still the matter of the movie itself. We've been waiting for Black Widow for over a year. It was among the first major movies to get delayed when the pandemic set in. But was it worth the lengthy wait? And does it deliver the quality cinematic spectacle that we've come to expect from the MCU? Well, I'm here to offer my take. And yes, that will include some heavy spoilers, so you have been warned. But I still won't hesitate to answer all those questions as best I can. Because the long and short of it is an emphatic yes. This movie does indeed deliver. It does succeed in giving us the story, spectacle, and character development that we've all come to know and love from Marvel Studios. And most importantly, in my opinion, this movie gives Natasha Romanov an appropriate ending within the MCU. Because if you saw Avengers Endgame, you know how it ends for her. She dies sacrificing herself in order to gain the Soul Stone. This movie does not change that. Instead, it explores the true breadth of Natasha's story. And it is a story worth telling. We know from previous MCU movies that she has a messy past. She has mentioned before how she has been a spy for most of her life. She mentioned how she has some proverbial red on her ledger, which she needed help removing before she could join S.H.I.E.L.D. and later the Avengers. But those details only scratch the surface. This movie dives much deeper into who Natasha is, where she came from, and what she went through in order to become the Black Widow. Her story has plenty of tragedy and hardship, but it also has a surprising amount of heart, hope, and triumph. From the very beginning, the movie isn't framed as this flashy superhero slugfest like Iron Man, Captain America, or Thor. It's structured more as a spy thriller and a mystery, one that just happens to take place in the MCU. But Black Widow is a bit more comprehensive in that it covers the past as much as the present. The initial setup for the movie is oddly deceptive, but in a good way. It starts in a quaint suburb of Ohio. You've got this nice family with two young girls. They're just outside playing, enjoying the weather and each other's company. Later on, they sit down together for a nice family dinner. And if you didn't know you were watching a Marvel movie, you think you're in for a very different kind of story. But it all changes quickly once the world of spies and super soldiers get involved. Because we soon find out that this setup was all a farce. That family wasn't a family. None of them were related in any way. Natasha was part of that, but so was Yelena Belova, Melina, and Alexei, aka Red Guardian. They were all just playing their part in a larger agenda. And once that agenda progressed, they all descended into the dark world of the Red Room. This is the true meat of Black Widow. Because, just like the comics, Natasha Romanov's life is largely defined by the Red Room. That's what made her the Black Widow. That's what made her the ultimate Soviet super spy. It's basically an evil version of the super soldier program that made Captain America. Many get drawn into it, but Natasha was one of the few who escaped. Doing so took a lot of strength, skill, and willpower. In that sense, it affirms why she was uniquely equipped to be an Avenger in the first place. But this movie isn't entirely about how Natasha became so capable. It's about her returning to the Red Room and taking it down once and for all. However, that's not her initial goal at first. Within the timeline of the MCU, this movie takes place shortly after Captain America's Civil War. That means when the story flashes forward to the present, she is on the run and being hunted by General Ross. Because of the Sokovia Accords, the Avengers have been split up, and she's completely on her own. But she's a spy. She's used to being hunted. Getting away from the heat is probably the easiest feat she pulls off in this movie. But she gets pulled back into the world of the Red Room, and the main catalyst for that is her former quasi-sister and fellow Red Room graduate, Yelena Belova. Now, if this movie has a breakout star, it's definitely Yelena. Florence Pugh really shines in this role, bringing to life a character who has always been a bit of a frenemy of sorts to Natasha. Her personality is different in that she's a lot more hardened and bitter. She also isn't the least bit inclined to follow the path of a superhero. But her story is still deeply tied to Natasha's. She's the reason Natasha finds out that the Red Room is still active. Young girls from all over the world are still being put through it. Their minds, bodies, and identities taken over and controlled. Yelena is also the reason why they actually have a mechanism for freeing those girls. She herself was only freed from that control when she uncovered a gas that broke their hold on her. Like Natasha, she's not initially inclined to take the fight to the Red Room. She's content to go into hiding and leave stuff like that to the Avengers. But because of the events of Civil War, that's just not possible. It's basically up to her and Natasha now to finish the job. And the more you learn about the horrors inflicted by the Red Room, the more you want to cheer them on. But if you're familiar with Marvel movies and their approach to action, humor, and blowing stuff up, you'll find plenty to enjoy here. Again, it's more in line with Winter Soldier than Guardians of the Galaxy. That style works better with Black Widow. For a character defined by spycraft, deceit, and espionage, it's almost necessary. But one thing Black Widow does to set itself apart, both from Winter Soldier and other MCU movies, is how it approaches family dynamics. It's certainly not the first MCU movie to emphasize family, but with Black Widow, there's a different context in play here. Like I said before, Natasha's family has never been her true family. She does not know who her biological mother is, and neither does Yelena for that matter. The only family she's ever known, the fake family she had with Alexei, Milena, and Yelena, that was always a farce, but that's not how it felt to her. For Natasha, even the facade of that family had a greater meaning. It didn't matter that these people weren't her real biological family. She still saw them as family. It's a sentiment that was also echoed in previous Avengers movies. She really did see them as part of a family. And she's willing to fight for that family, regardless of whether their DNA matches. And she gets others to join her in that fight. Yelena, Alexei, and Milena don't embrace it at first, but the more they conduct themselves as a family, the more real it feels to them. They bicker, berate, and bemoan like you'd expect of any family. And in those moments, David Harbour's portrayal of Red Guardian really shines. In fact, some of the funniest, most endearing moments of the movie manifest through his character. He keeps things within the family from getting too dark or serious. He also plays a major role in eventually helping Natasha and Yelena take down the Red Room. That's the greatest strength of this movie. That's its ultimate triumph. It takes Natasha Romanov, this character who was always alone, a super spy caught up in the world of superheroes, and it gives her a family. It gives her a life, one that had a dark beginning, but one that also led her towards greater triumphs. From joining S.H.I.E.L.D. to becoming an Avenger to making the ultimate sacrifice in Endgame, this movie gives even greater weight to her role in the larger MCU. It makes what she achieves that much more impressive. For some, myself included, it also made her death in Endgame hurt that much more. That alone is more than enough to carry this movie. But at the same time, the movie does have some weaknesses. And it's here where I'll have to be mindful of my criticisms, because there are some who will give them more scrutiny than this movie deserves. Because if Black Widow does have one major weakness, it revolves around Taskmaster and its main villain, Dreykov. Now, Marvel villains get more scrutiny than most, mainly because villains like Thanos and Killmonger have raised the bar so much. But in this case, you don't need much scrutiny to see the flaws in these villains. Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, the man who seems to enjoy controlling people at every level, he really isn't that interesting. And for the most part, he doesn't really try to be. He's just the face of this organization that Natasha has to take down. He's the personification of the Red Room's greatest evil, this big, dehumanizing effort that has taken the lives, minds, and bodies of so many girls like her. And his only stated reason for doing this, it just revolves around power and influence. That basically makes him a less menacing version of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. But as bland as Dreykov is, it's really Taskmaster who's the most disappointing. And it's not just because this version of Taskmaster has little in common with the comics. In fact, I kind of understand why Marvel Studios chose this route. By making Taskmaster someone more closely tied to Natasha's past, specifically the red on her ledger that she mentioned way back in Avengers, it makes more sense from a plot perspective. The problem is, it just doesn't have enough depth. That's not to say Taskmaster is a bad villain. She, and yes, I know I'm spoiling the major details here by revealing it's a she, she's basically a robot for most of this movie. And by the time she shows some personality, the movie's pretty much over. Now, would it have worked better if the movie tried to bring in Tony Masters, the man who goes by Taskmasters in the Marvel Comics? That's hard to say. But that's the thing. This movie isn't about Taskmaster. It's about Black Widow. And I suspect that trying to develop a character like him in a movie like this would have just detracted from that effort. But even with the flaws surrounding the main villains, Black Widow is a very satisfying movie. If the goal was to give Natasha Romanov one last hurrah before closing out her story in the MCU, it definitely succeeded. In addition, the post-credit scene opens the door for Florence Pugh to carry on Natasha's legacy as the Black Widow, albeit not for S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers. But I won't spoil that detail. More than anything else, Black Widow completes a journey, one that started in Iron Man 2 and ended in Avengers Endgame. This movie expands and celebrates the life of Natasha Romanov. It gives greater weight to the choices she made in life, as well as the impact of her death. After seeing this movie, I find the weight of her death in Endgame hitting that much harder, but for all the right reasons. Overall, Black Widow is not a perfect Marvel movie, but it's a movie that works and succeeds in all the ways it had to. If I had to give it a score, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Despite being delayed for more than a year, and by forces far beyond its control, this movie still resonates. It still makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe bigger, better, and richer. It also establishes a strong, worthy legacy for Natasha Romanov. Hopefully, Yelena will get a chance to honor it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and stay safe.